Hi guys, good afternoon, Malaysia time. Welcome to Apka Chef Online. So today, right, I'm going to do a masterclass with you all with all the French pastry. We are going to do 6 different types of the products. For the first type, it's going to be a travel cake, chocolate brownie, then pandan layer cake, blossom, apple yuzu tart, senzu, and chocolate Paris breast. And after all, you see the last one, right, is the finishing. All the glazes and the spraying, I'm going to put together inside one recipe. Before we start the recipe, right, I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to conduct the class. So each time, right, I will try not to skip from one recipe to another too soon. But there will have 1 or 2 recipes I have to skip because we are going to wait for quite some time. The other side, when you all have questions, right, I will give you all time to ask when I'm doing. Let's say if I'm waiting for something, right, then I will let you ask some question. I will cue you all. Then, because we are going to mute for everyone, you can type down your question. Then we will have admin. When I will ask her to check with me the question, right, she will ask me, then I'm gonna explain to you all. So basically, almost each layering for each cake, right, when it's almost finished, I'm gonna start to let you all ask question. But you can keep on typing your question down on the Zoom there, then admin will ask me. So guys, the first recipe that we are going to start, you can check on the page 13, is Senzu. The first one is jacon. So we are going to start with jacon. It's the sponge. So for the jacon, right, first I'm going to warm up the eggs and icing sugar inside the bowl to make a sabayon. Try to keep your eggs right in the room temperature, so it's easier to warm up. And now I'm going to warm it up to 35 degrees Celsius. The reason that I do this step, right, is to make sure when we whip, right, the sabayon can reach the maximum volume of it. For doing a sponge, right, it's very important we do this step. If you skip this step, you will see the volume of your sabayon when whip out, right, is not that nice. And also when you fold, right, they are going to collapse easier. And guys, there's small tips for you. When you warm up, right, if the water is boiling, like really hot, you have to reduce to low heat. So we are not going to overcook the eggs. Alright, now the water is boiling. And make sure it's not too hot. Use a low heat. Alright, now it's 35 degrees. Directly whip it up. So I'm gonna whip for around 3 to 5 minutes for fast speed, then reduce to medium speed to whip for another 3 to 5 minutes. While waiting, right, on the other side, I'm gonna put the meringue inside first. But we don't start the egg white for the meringue. We have to make sure we done the sabayon first, then we start to do the meringue. Because once we done the meringue, right, we have to use it right away. So we have to make sure sabayon first always, then because sabayon after we done, right, we can still wait for a while before we use it. So while waiting for this recipe, right, because it will take 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to continue for the next one, Yuzu cream mousse. For the Yuzu cream mousse, right, it's quite straightforward. First, right, I'm gonna put the Yuzu puree, orange juice, and orange zest together. Alright, so now the sabayon start to raise up. I'm gonna use the medium speed, let it beat for another 3 to 5 minutes. The beginning, right, is to push the sabayon to raise up, and now, right, we are going to cut the bubble to smaller so they are going to be more stable. I'm gonna wait for a while before I start the cream mousse because the sabayon is almost ready. Alright, then melt the butter. And while waiting, right, now the sabayon is almost done. I'm gonna start the meringue. For the meringue, right, make sure we start by medium speed. So guys, if at your home, right, you don't have 2 mixers, if you have only 1 mixer, you can start your sabayon first, make sure it's done nicely. Then after that, only you start the egg white. So for the egg white, right, to do a meringue, we're gonna whip until it starts to be foamy, then slowly add in the sugar. Don't add all the sugar in the beginning. Otherwise, right, they are not going to raise up until maximum. The volume is not good enough. Alright, now the egg white start to be foamy. I'm gonna add the sugar slowly. Divide it to 3 to 4 parts. So the sugar is not going to collapse our egg whites. They are going to melt properly and going to raise up properly. Alright, so after pour all the sugar into the meringue, right, let it whip for a while. Make sure we are going to whip until medium or firm thick. Don't be too soft. And almond powder. Now the sabayon already reached the stage that I need. I'm going to show you. So you will see the texture. We won't have a peak because it's sabayon, it's not a meringue. If for the meringue, right, we are going to have a peak. But sabayon, we are going to whip until it's light, like this way. Then I'm going, by using the machine, right, we can slowly add in the almond powder. But make sure it's only almond powder. Flour, we are going to fold. If you put the flour and almond powder together, you put inside, right, the sabayon are going to collapse it. So you make sure we don't want to have any gluten, so just almond powder, low speed. Mix it well. So like this way, right, the sabayon still going to be very light, very airy. But this way can help us to shorten up the mixing time. So you can see, still very light. Now I'm going to transfer to a bowl so it's easier to fold. Alright, so the meringue is almost done. Alright, so you can see the texture for meringue. Medium thick, close to firm. So first, I'm gonna fold the meringue into the sabayon, then later followed by the flour. Just fold it nicely, and you will see the mixture is going to be very airy. Because the folding is very less, so the mixture is not going to collapse. Then now I'm going to put the sifted flour. Just pour on the surface bit by bit and fold it nicely. Don't put everything one time, otherwise right, the mixture is going to have a lot of gluten. Then the mixture is going to collapse. Alright. So after 4 hours, right, you can see the mixture still very airy. Now we are going to put in the butter. So make sure we melt the butter, but just to keep it warm. Don't be too hot, otherwise we are going to collapse the mixture. Just take a small part from a sponge mixture, mix into the butter. Like this way, right, is to make sure we are going to mix easier the fat into the sponge mix. If you pour the fat directly, right, you will see when you want to mix, right, it's going to take it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to be very difficult to mix the fat into the sponge mix. So like this way, right, I sacrifice a small mixture of a sponge mix to mix nicely with a fat. Like this way, right, we are going to mix it very fast and fold very less. Okay, so now the mixture is done. So when you see right after we done the sponge, it's not going to be super airy. It's not going to be super liquid, quite airy. And if you see properly, right, the surface is supposed to be slightly shining. If it's not shining, means you are not mixing enough. You are going to mix a little bit more. Otherwise, right, the sponge is going to be over airy, and when you eat, it's going to be very dry. So now I'm gonna spread on the tray. Over here, I prepared the 30x40 flexi pan. So we are going to spray around 1 centimeter thickness. So the recipe I gave you, right, will be just nice for 30x40 size of tray. Alright, now I'm gonna bake inside the oven for 180 degrees for around 10 to 12 minutes. So guys, now I'm gonna continue back with the yuzu cream milk. So I put the egg yolk inside the bowl together with the sugar. Mix well. Puree and orange juice and orange zest inside the pot together with the cream. So now first thing I'm gonna boil the fruits and the cream. When you put the cream into the acidic puree or juice, right, you will see in the beginning they are splitting. But once you heat it up, right, they will be okay. So no worries about it. If the recipe you see we put in rose flour, so it's T45, okay, cake flour, okay. But some of the recipe I put out rose flour, but on the side I put T55, right? You just have to make sure you use the T55 because in Malaysia we don't have T45. I mean we have, it's a bit difficult to get, but our local flour we have for cake flour usually is rose, and bread flour is diamond flour. So you just take it simple, rose flour as cake flour. Alright.
What is yuzu and the other option?
But you can use lemon if you don't use the yuzu.
Which sugar are you using when you mix with ice cream and the regular sugar?
But just follow the recipe. If the recipe asks you to use sugar, you use sugar. If the recipe write down icing sugar, you use icing sugar. Simple as that. Alright. So for question, a while more, the mixture start to boil.
Where can I get this recipe?
But online, you can get from Silicon Mart, you can get from Sasa the Mall. Alright, the mixture is boiling. Just pour the mixture into the yolk a little bit. Mix well. Basically, it's like a creme anglaise. And we pour it back. And now, right, we have to recook to a small boil or 85 degrees. But actually, I prefer to check this one. Just brings it to small boil. By using a low heat, once you see it boil a little bit, see a little bit bubbling, then you can stop. You will reach the consistency that we need. Make sure using a low heat. If you use high heat, right, you are going to burn the bottom part because inside we have a lot of yolk. We don't want to overcook the yolk, otherwise, right, it's going to be very eggy taste. So just bring to boil. Okay. Don't boil for long, guys. Once you see it start to bubbling, have a small boil. Remove from heat and stir for a while to make sure there's no catches at the bottom. Add in the gelatin mass. You'll see the recipe for gelatin mass inside also at the finishing part. I'm using 1 part of the water mixed with 6 parts of the gelatin powder, 200 bloom. We can, I'm gonna explain to you a little bit at the end of the day about the gelatin. So once it mixed well, in the recipe, ask you to cool down the mixture to 40 degrees, then we add in the butter. But for me, I try both ways. We add the butter while it's hot, or we let it cool down to 40 degrees. For this recipe, there's no huge difference. Because for this recipe, the amount of butter is small. The moment if you have a recipe, butter is a lot, I suggest you to cool down to 40 degrees. So like that way, right, we are not going to melt the butter. But for this recipe, it's fine. Small amount of butter. So it's not going to have huge difference. That's why sometimes the student keep asking, sometimes why the recipe asks to put 40 degrees. Oh, gelatin. Okay. Later I explain one more time. Sorry guys, just now the ratio for the gelatin is 1 time of powder, 6 times of water. I explained overturn. But you have the recipe inside, so no worries guys. So after we mix in the butter, transfer to a jar. I'm gonna blend it. This step is important. If you skip this step, right, the mixture after cool down, right, it's not going to be smooth. So we have to make sure we emulsify nicely. Just by using hand blender, blend it nicely. Alright. So after done, now I'm gonna wrap it and keep at the side. When the sponge and the compote is done, I'm gonna assemble it. Since it's hot, right, we wrap it and touch the surface. And we can keep inside the chiller for around half hours to 1 hour. Once it cools down to room temperature, it's easier for us to build the cake. So for the next one, I'm gonna start with the before I start the next one, right, you'll see there's a almond croissant. This one, right, I already pre-prepared because for the next recipe blossom, we are going to have a similar step. So we can skip this one first. Then the next recipe, we are going to start the strawberry compote. So first, right, I'm going to cut the vanilla bean. Into the puree. We can put the stick together, no worries. Later we can remove it after it's cooked, so we can fully utilize the flavor from a vanilla. So for this recipe, right, is slightly different, as we are going to prepare a caramel first, so we can get so the compote, right, the flavor are going to be strong and the sweetness are going to be low. So first, put the sugar and water. We are going to cook to around 165 degrees Celsius or a light caramel. We don't want the taste of caramel, guys, but we are going to put it slightly blonde, so the sweetness of sugar we can push to lowest. It's not going to taste so sweet. So let it boil slowly. And important for the fruits, frozen fruits, we are going to put together raspberry and strawberry. Okay. Puree, we keep separate. And when we cook caramel with a little bit of liquid, try to not stir a lot, otherwise it will crystallize. Just mix well in the beginning, let it boil, and let it caramelize slowly. We don't want to crystallize it. You will see a lot of books tell you if you stir a lot, it will crystallize. Yes. So try to not stir too much. Alright, it starts to be blonde. I'm going to reduce the heat and let it caramelize slowly. Alright, so guys, you see, when the mixture starts to be slightly yellowish, don't go too much. Like this is sufficient. Then I'm going to add in lowers down the heat, add in the puree first. Adding raspberry puree with the vanilla. Add in slowly because we don't want the sugar, right, to set. Alright. Then follow with the yuzu and lemon juice. Because we want to keep the yuzu flavor there, so try to not add in the beginning, otherwise they are going to evaporate a lot of flavor. Alright. Then I mix the small amount of sugar, pectin and xanthan together. By using a whisk, right, we are going to mix it well. But make sure at this point we want to mix inside, right, the mixture is not boiling. Make sure it's warm, not too hot, otherwise you are going to have a lot of lumps. And the whole fruit. And now we can increase the heat again and brings to boil. In this recipe, right, you see we use xanthan because usually, right, if a recipe that using the fruits like frozen fruit or fresh fruit, I prefer to add a little bit of xanthan inside our compote or jelly. So in that case, right, when it's freeze, the xanthan can help to lock the water. After defrost, right, the liquid from the fruit is not going to leak out. So the mixture is the jelly is going to be more stable. If the recipe not using the whole fruits or frozen fruits, right, you can skip the xanthan, no problem. And now brings to boil. Okay, boil properly. Off the heat. Add in the bloom gelatin. So after mix well, take out the vanilla stick. Then depends on me, I prefer to blend it a little bit to make sure we blend the powder properly. And also, I don't want to have too big chunks of the fruits. But if you like to have big chunks of the fruits, right, before you add the fruits, after you mix in the powder, right, you can blend one time first. So it's either way. I prefer to have a small chunks of fruits, so I'm gonna blend together. You see, after cooked properly, they are supposed to be slightly thicker like this way. Okay, just blend for a while. This is to make sure we don't have big chunks of the fruits, and also the powder that we mixed earlier, right, is going to be mixed well properly. Alright. And over here, right, I prepare a silicone mold, 6 inches, or you can use a ring and you wrap it It works as long as 6 inches. Because the cake I have right for the mold, I'm going to use 7 inches. So now I'm going to pour 100 grams inside the layers. This is the layers that I feel, the thickness I feel is good. But if you like to have slightly more composed, right, you can put a little bit more or lesser. Up to you. You can decide the balance. So put 100 grams into the mold. Basically the thickness right is around 8 mm. If you are changing the size of the cake right, you just make sure you get the layers around 8 mm. Usually you will get the taste which is good. Shake a little bit to make sure it's even. Okay guys, to make it faster, I'm gonna put inside the blast freezer to freeze a little bit. Then I'm gonna, once it sets a little bit right, I'm gonna pour the cream mousse on top. Then now the sponge is ready. I'm going to show you. Alright. So guys, you see the jacon. So with the oven, today we bake around 13 minutes, okay? Carefully put on the parchment paper, then unmold it. Before unmold, we have to make sure we keep in the room to cool it down, or you can keep inside the freezer to make it cool down faster. And after, by using a 6 inches ring, same, we cut it. For the class, usually one recipe you can get 4 to 5 pieces for the 60 times 40. Sorry, 30 times 40. But today, for the issue of time, right, I'm going to just prepare 2 cakes. So we are going to move slightly faster. So until now, any question? No, you cannot substitute almond powder with rose flour. It's not a jacon. A jacon must have the nuts inside. If you want to substitute, right, then you better use quinoa. You can look for a recipe in Upcast Chef online. You look for a recipe for quinoa.
If you use blended instead of Yuzu, will it still be 86 grams for the Yuzu?
Yes, you can directly change just the flavor difference, but the consistency of the texture is not going to change.
Can you repeat the gelatin mass?
Gelatin mass, I'm using 1 part of the gelatin powder, 200 bloom, mixed with 6 parts of water. Okay?
In case using gelatin sheet, what is the calculation for sheet when it comes to 2 grams for each sheet?
No, it's very easy. You first have to look for sheet. You look for the gold gelatin sheet, 200 bloom or gold gelatin sheet, okay? Mixed with 6 parts of water. That's it.
What is almond duja?
Almond duja. Almond duja is almond powder. You blend into a paste. Okay, so it's almond duja.
So what is the substitute for xanthan?
Oh, no substitute. For the recipe, you have to look for the xanthan. You can take it out, like what I explained. If it works for your cake, but I will suggest you, if like that case, right, you have to put the jelly directly on top of the sponge. So after defrost, right, the fruit juice are going into the sponge, but it's not going to leak out if you don't have a xanthan. Or You can use the recipe for blossom. The next cake I prepare for you is the recipe without the xanthan. Okay, it's a jelly also without xanthan.
So if let's say for the strawberry compote, your recipe have both yuzu and also lemon.
Yeah.
So there's a substitute for the yuzu.
Lemon juice.
So just total out the lemon.
Yep. Then why, guys? Because we are going to wait for the strawberry compote to freeze a while. So now we are going to go for the next cake, the blossom. So for blossom, page 9, because I'm going to start with the raspberry red fruit jelly first. So for this one, right, due to the time, I already infused the red fruit tea with water this morning. So until now it's okay. So you put the red fruit tea with water together, just squeeze out for 4 hours. It depends how strong you want, but I don't like to put too long. Usually you warm up the water. You warm up water, then you mix with the red fruit tea. That's it. Don't mix with the puree first, just water, because we are going to rescale the amount. So if we are short, right, we are going to replace with the amount of water. So I have to rescale back 100 grams of the water. Okay, usually after you infuse, right, the amount are going to short a little bit. I'm going to replace back. Now I have around 77, 78. So I'm going to make it 100 grams again. All right. And after, I'm going to put in the puree. If the puree is not frozen, if it is liquid like this, then we can directly mix in the sugar and pectin. So guys, if you cannot get xanthan, you use a recipe of the jelly like this kind. That's why I put different kind of cake for you. Some of it with fruit, but you need to have slightly different ingredients. Some of it without the fruit, right, which is like what I have right now, is easier. Mix well the sugar and the pectin. If the puree is melted, guys, you can put it in the beginning. If the puree is not melted, you can warm it up first. Then once the puree is fully melted, then you mix inside. Just mix well the sugar pectin into the puree and the red fruit tea. Now just cook to boil. For this jelly, very straightforward. But because of our red fruit tea, right, we are going to get a very fragrant taste of the jelly. Just by using a high heat, brings to boil. Okay, for this recipe, right, we don't really need to, after we cook already, right, boil, we don't really need to blend again. Because usually if you just pectin and sugar, right, we can mix it nicely. So we just bring to boil. But make sure we bring to a proper boil, not a small boil. Make sure you boil everywhere. So we can activate the pectin properly. Alright. The mixture is boiling. Stir nicely to make sure there's no catches at the bottom. Alright, so after done, right, we can keep inside the room temperature to let it cool down. I'm gonna use it straight away to save the time. Usually if you want to work bigger batch, right, you can let it cool down to room temperature. Then you will see the mixture will get slightly thicker. Then you can stick the sponge on top. But for today, right, because I already pre-prepared the sponge, So you can go for the page 8 to see the vanilla sponge. Just now I show you how to make the jacon, right? This one I already pre-make. We don't need to spend time on this. The method very straightforward. If you all know what is financier, right? This is a recipe almost like financier. Then we add meringue inside. So I explain you the step. First, we put the almond powder, sugar, small part of egg white, egg yolk, vanilla essence, salt, melted butter, and the cream together. We just mix well. Just mix well by a paddle, or you can use a whisk to mix well. It will become like a mixture like financier. Okay. Then after that, we make a meringue with the egg white sugar and inverted sugar. So we have the egg white. We make a meringue ready. You fold into the base mixture. Then last, you fold in flour and baking powder. That's it. Over here, the flour is T55. You can use all-purpose flour for this recipe. It's very straightforward. Then after that, we pour into the ring, or you can spread like earlier. Otherwise, you can pour inside the ring like this. You pour 80% because for this one, I want to be slightly thicker. The sponge after bake is supposed to have around 2 cm thickness. After done, we bake with 170 degrees. If it's this size, guys, you don't bake 25 minutes. If this size, right, usually it's 13 to 15 minutes is enough. Don't bake for too long. So you will get the sponge like this, 2 cm thickness. Okay? Then now I'm gonna, because the sponge I pre-prepare, I keep inside the freezer. So I don't need to wait too much for my jelly to cool down. I can use it straight away. It's easier. So for this, right, we need to have 150 grams inside the mold. It's going to be thicker because the layer is going to be more straightforward. Basically, we want to have a thickness around 1 cm for our jelly. Okay, then put a sponge on top. Make sure it's straight, so later the layers are going to be nice. And guys, you see from a blossom, right, for the layering that I draw, right, originally I put the layers of the vanilla cream mousse, but I already removed it. Since for the selling part, I also remove it because I don't find it huge difference if I add in the cream mousse or I remove the cream mousse. So it's the recipe you see, right, I already take out the vanilla cream mousse. For the enchanté also, I don't put the cream mousse anymore. Okay? So now I'm gonna keep inside the freezer to freeze it properly. Later after it's frozen, then I'm gonna start to layer it. Then guys, we come back to the Senzu. Now I'm gonna start to layer it. Because the compote is already frozen, it's set. For the cream mousse, right, I'm going to put 120 grams for the layers. It's page 13, guys, the Yuzu cream mousse. And the jacon, we cut it earlier. Same way, just place on the cream mousse. and make sure it's straight. Same. Now I'm gonna put it in the blast freezer to freeze properly. Now I'm gonna prepare the almond croissant. Guys, the recipe for Senzu for the almond croissant and the blossom is same, but I suggest you to check for the recipe for blossom better, because I got put down the amount of the almond powder and icing sugar. So page 8. You see the vanilla croissant? It's the same recipe, guys. There's no difference. There's no much difference for these two. It's the same method, okay? So just now someone asked me what is almond duja, right? So you put the almond powder and icing sugar together, toast the almond powder first, then after you blend into a paste, then you get the almond duja, okay? So I already have almond duja, so you can ignore the almond powder and icing sugar. So first, I'm gonna melt the white chocolate. Melt it properly. Little bit more. And the sea salt, right? We crush the sea salt. Otherwise, right, when you eat the crunch, sometimes you eat one part is too salty because the sea salt is big. So I prefer to crush it first to make it into a powder form. Alright. Then the white chocolate, after it's melted, almond duja, mix well first. Then vanilla powder, soft butter, make sure the butter is soft, otherwise, right, it's difficult to mix well. Vanilla stick. For this, make sure we don't put a stick, we just put the pot inside. Mix well again. So basically, right, it just mix well for everything. Once there's no lumps, right, we can add in the gelatin. So for the blossom, right, one way we can directly spread it to around 3 to 5 millimeter, then cut, okay? But because I'm going to do it right now for just 2 cakes, easier we can put the ring. 6 inches also. I need around, for making between 3 to 5 millimeter, we need around 100 gram to 120 gram for the 6 inches ring. Alright. Just spread it out. After done, remove the ring. Now I'm gonna keep this right inside the freezer. Try to not keep this inside the blast freezer, otherwise right, they are going to bend. So if you want it to be straight, right, just keep inside the freezer will be sufficient. So after the croissant, so now we done the vanilla sponge, vanilla croissant, red fruit jelly, and we are going to wait for the filling to set first before we start to do the vanilla and white chocolate mousse. So I will skip that and start to do the vanilla chantilly first. So by page 10, we have vanilla chantilly. So for the recipe for vanilla chantilly, right, you will see there is 2 cream. One is small amount, one is big amount. The small amount we are going to warm it up. The big amount cream, right, always keep it cold inside the chiller. Make sure it's cold. So when we mix inside, right, later when we want to whip it up, it's possible. If you leave it in the room temperature, later you want to whip it up, right, it's difficult. So first, keep the small amount of cream inside the pot. We are going to warm it up. Sugar. Then vanilla bean. Usually the leftover bean don't throw. We can dry it up and after that can proceed into a vanilla powder. So now I'm going to warm it up just to melt the sugar. Alright, now the sugar melted. We add in the gelatin mass. Make sure it's melted. So transfer into a jar. Make sure the gelatin mass fully melted first, guys, before we add in the cold cream. Otherwise, right, it's difficult to melt again afterwards. Okay, so make sure the sugar and the gelatin mass fully melted. Add in the cold cream. And now I'm gonna blend with hand blender. Make sure you blend well and mix well, no lumps. Alright. So after done, right, we are going to cling film and keep inside a chiller for minimum 8 hours. For this chantilly, we make sure we have to rest it. Otherwise, right, if you whip straight away, it's not going to raise up because we heat up the small part of cream. Now the mixture is not stable enough. After leave inside the chiller, the next day or after 8 hours when we whip up, it's going to be very stable. Okay, guys. So now we're already done the fillings for blossom and senzu. Okay, any question you can ask. If you want to replace with other fruits, right, it depends on the acidity. If you are replacing with a cherry or blueberry, is okay. But if you replace with the mango, then it will be different.
Any other options for the red fruit tea?
But you can use any other tea, no worries. If you like to have the Earl Grey, well, you can go for Earl Grey.
Does the method of sticking the tea can be applied for sponge cake with tea flavor?
If sponge cake, right, I don't, beside the shoe sponge, okay, which have a lot of liquids, the other sponge, I don't suggest to infuse like this way. It doesn't give you a strong taste. If it's sponge, right, I would prefer you to get the tea leaf and blend into a powder and directly mix inside.
The vanilla sponge, how much grams is the baking?
Vanilla sponge, don't know. I cannot tell you how much gram because the moment if you scale by gram, right, it collapses. So I never practice scale by gram. So you have to pour around the thickness that you know, then you bake it because there's meringue inside. You cannot just scale and keep on scraping, they collapse. You can. If you don't have vanilla powder, you can use vanilla essence, no problem.
What is the replacement of gelatin if it's not available?
But you can use cornflake, you can use crispy rice, but the texture will be different, it's not exactly same.
Is there a replacement for almond syrup?
Hazelnut praline or pure hazelnut paste. If you are using hazelnut praline, you make sure you use a high content, 70% of nuts, 30% of sugar, otherwise it's going to be too sweet.
There is a small question.
Yeah.
1 kg mixture, how much fruit gelatin can use? And then if let's say use gelatin mass, please advise the little confit in gelatin mass and gelatin glue and the use of gelatin shake. Please advise.
But I'm gonna answer this in the end of the class.
Okay. Chef, what is your brand for hand blender?
Bar mix. So the next one, because now I cannot proceed with the mousse for blossom and senzu first because we have to wait the filling to freeze properly. So I'm gonna do the next one is the pandan log cake. So you check the page, pandan layer cake, page 5. Oh, sorry, page 7. I'm gonna start with the almond strazzle base first. So guys, I'm gonna explain because this one I prepared halfway. You see the recipe right? Page 7, almond strudel. In the beginning, I have almond duja, cocoa butter, white chocolate, sea salt, and gelatin. Until this part, I haven't do, so I'm gonna show you how to mix it. Then, you see after that we have a strudel. I already pre-prepared the strudel. Okay, strudel is a type of the crumble, but usually slightly higher content of fat or butter. Okay, so you just put the butter, brown sugar, hazelnut powder, toasted hazelnut powder, guys, rose flour, and salt together. You just paddle into a crumble form like this way, and you bake in the oven 160 degrees, 150-160 degrees for around 18 to 20 minutes. So after you're done right, let it cool down. We get a strudel like this. To save the time, because it's very straightforward recipe, so I pre-prepare it. Make sure you have to bake it first, let it cool down. If you mix when it's hot, right, you are going to lose the texture. So after you've done the crumble, just leave, or strudel, just leave it in the room temperature to cool down. And now, put the strudel inside the mixer. Sea salt. Then the other side, we can put the white chocolate and duja together. Make sure the white chocolate is melted. So same again, guys. I use a lot of almond duja because the difference between almond and hazelnut, right? I mean, you can use hazelnut praline also, but I like to use duja because the flavor is more neutral. So it's easier to match with a lot of other flavor like pandan or something which is lighter in flavor. It's easier to use the almond, okay? But if you really cannot make it or you cannot get it, you can replace with the praline. Then cocoa butter also, after melted, mix together. Oh, it's too much difficult to mix. So I better pour inside here. Just mix well to become a white chocolate and duja paste. The reason I use cocoa butter over here, right, is to replace the part of the white chocolate so it's not too sweet. In the very beginning, right, the recipe is using more white chocolate. There's no cocoa butter, but I realized it's too sweet. So after that, I change. So after mix well, before mixing the gelatin, just mix well everything together inside the mixing bowl. By using a paddle to mix it well. The reason I don't put the gelatin first is I want to keep the texture of gelatin. So I mix well the mixture first. When I put in the gelatin, right, I just have to mix a little bit so it's not going to be too fine. I still get a nice texture of it. And like just now you asked me if you don't have the gelatin, right, we can use the crispy base like this way. By replacing it with the strudel, it works, okay? So if you don't have gelatin, you measure the amount of gelatin. Over here is 173 grams. You take the baked strudel to replace it, it works. So now the strudel is already mixed well. I show you. So after mix well, you see it's slightly sticky because now you have a lot of the almond paste and the chocolate and cocoa butter. Now we have to mix in gelatin. Mix again. Then the mixture is going to be more slightly drier. Just mix it well. Make sure the fillety is totally covered by the white chocolate and the paste, so it's not going to be, after we keep inside the chiller, right, it will set, okay? And the fat from the chocolate and the almond paste, right, is going to protect our strudel and also filleting, so when you eat it still remain crispy. Alright. So guys, you see after done, it's going to be drier, but when you press, they are going to stick together. A little bit like the cheesecake base, but that is different because that we have to rebake again, and it's used butter, so not that crispy. Now we're using cocoa butter and chocolate is more crispy. So after done, by using the parchment paper, I'm going to roll it to around 3 to 5 millimeter. It depends again. If you like to have more crispy, you can roll to 5 millimeter. If you like to be not too much crispy, you can roll it slightly thinner, 3 millimeter. It very depends on the production you want to have. And over here, right, I prepare the acrylic with 5 millimeter. So like this way, right, I can get it quite easily with a thickness. Make sure it's tight so it's not going to break afterwards. Alright, just make it even. So you can see, we get a nice 5 millimeter thickness. Now I'm gonna freeze it inside the freezer. So later, right, when I want to layer the cake, right, I'm gonna cut it to the size that I want. Alright, so the next one, we are going to do the pandan shoe sponge first. So the pandan, right, is a leaf, okay? Then there's a lot of flavor in this leaf. Usually in Asia, right, we use a lot because the flavor is very suitable to make something sweet or dessert, okay? And also we use for a lot of cooking as well. So for this recipe, right, and if you can get a fresh pandan leaf, right, the color is going to be very, very nice. Because this one I already keep 2 days, so after we blend the color, it's going to be less a bit. If you want to have a nicer color and better flavor, you can use a very fresh one. So first, right, we are going to infuse the pandan leaf into the milk. So we are going to warm up the milk first and cut the pandan leaf to small. Make sure wash the pandan leaf first, and keep inside to warm up together. Why? So Like just now you all asked me, right, if it's tea you want to put inside the sponge, this recipe is a good recipe that you can put the tea leaf to infuse like this. Because for shoe sponge, right, the amount of liquid is a lot. So when you do infusion, you can feel the flavor. Like in the e-commerce shop that I have, right, for enchanté, we are having the Earl Grey sponge by using the same way to prepare. But the amount you have to try. So we have to bring to boil first. Alright, now the milk is boiling. Then we have a pandan leaf inside. And by using a juicer, we are going to blend it nicely. And again guys, when we are mixing this kind of liquid infusion, right, usually, right, we are going to get a bit lesser of the amount. So usually, right, I will add a little bit more of the milk inside. To make sure after I blend, right, I have enough liquid. So I'm gonna add a little bit extra milk inside because after I blend, right, we are going to have it's going to reduce a little bit because the pandan is going to absorb the liquid. Okay guys, you see blend for quite some time, make sure the pandan is really fine. We will get the milk with very nice color. And guys, right now I prepare, right, the recipe I gave you over here, one recipe you can get 2 trays, okay? Because I pre-prepare one, before. Now when I do demo, I only do half recipe. So the amount you see I have, right, is going to be slightly smaller. So we get the strainer with towel, strain back the amount that we need. Little bit less. Yep, I need 167, 168. Okay. Okay, now after rescale back the milk with pandan. Okay, so we continue. First, put the butter. It's we call it a shoe sponge, right? Because we are going to prepare almost like a shoe pastry. So first, we are going to melt the butter. We are going to cook like a roux first. So we are going to cook the butter and the flour nicely. It's very important for this recipe, right? We have to cook the flour. Otherwise, right, later when we bake, the sponge is not going to raise up nicely. They won't have a nice structure. And here I have the bread flour and the all-purpose flour I put together. Make sure we put the butter and bring to boil first. Make sure you have a proper boil, hot enough. Alright, then add in the flour. Make sure sieve the flour first. Reduce the heat to low heat and continue cook it. So make sure we cook it a little bit to make sure it's thick enough like this. And you see the bottom part of the pot have a little bit of catches. This part is important. We have to make sure we cook properly. Then reduce to low heat. You can see it becomes a dough. Add in the warm milk. This is very important. We have to make sure the milk is warm. Otherwise, like this way, right, we are making sure we cook a little bit more of the flour again. So like this way, right, you see we can get a natural nice color of the pandan. After mix well, mix the remaining of the liquid. Now I'm still using a low heat to cook the mixture a little bit. So you see we get the dough again. Okay, then we can stop the heat. To work it easier, I transfer to a bowl with paddle. We are going to mix like the choux pastry. Beat a little bit to cool it down. Make sure we don't see much of a steam. Then we are going to add in the eggs. For the eggs, right, make sure we remain in the room temperature. If the egg is cold, right, you can double boil to warm it up a little bit. So I'm gonna put the whole egg and the yolk together and mix well before pour inside. Alright, now there's not a lot of steam coming out. We can slowly add in the eggs. Divide to 2 to 3 times when you pour in the eggs. Before adding all the eggs, right, we have to scrape the side to make sure there's no lumps. Then, while waiting for the mixture to mix well, right, I'm gonna start to mix the meringue. Again, the same thing, meringue, right, don't prepare earlier. Make sure we done this, then we start to prepare the meringue. Medium speed. For the meringue, we have to whip until firm peak. For this recipe, very particular, try to mix it until firm peak, because like this way, when we fold, right, the structure is going to be better. So guys, after we done, right, you see the mixture is a little bit liquid but not too watery. It's like a pastry cream texture. And if you have lumps, you can use a blender to blend a little bit, or you can strain it. Or if you mix nicely like this, no lumps, it's good. We can fold with meringue straight away. Usually if you mix nicely, you shouldn't have much lumps. See guys, I don't need to add any color for this because the pandan leaf really give nice color. Alright, the egg white start to be foamy. Add the sugar slowly. Are there any questions from them? No question? First time, no question. Well guys, you are good, huh? No question. Alright, thank you. And guys, for this recipe, before we're done, we have to make sure we preheat the oven because it's going to, how to say, I don't say it collapses very fast, but try to, once you're done right, put inside the oven as soon as possible. You'll get the texture is really nice. And this recipe also is suitable for you to do the roll cake, okay? Because it's actually pastry line, right? We developed this recipe, originally it's for roll cake. Or this sponge, you can put a lot inside your cake because it's going to feel very moist. It's not going to be dry. That's why for this cake, right, you see, it will be very different with the mousse cake. I have a lot of the sponge but less cream because the sponge itself is very moist. You don't feel like eating something dry. But you do the plain one. You don't have pandan, then you have to do the plain one. But you can use the Earl Grey, like I mentioned. But then this cake is very Asian, guys. It's very, very Asian. Then the taste is very Asian also. You can change to the tea, like I mentioned. The sponge you can do different flavor. Because the filling also later have pandan also. So you can switch to the tea if you want. A little bit more. Guys, you see when I do meringue, right? I don't want to rush too much because always make sure using a medium speed, right? You get a structure for meringue which is very good. When you fold, it's not going to collapse. No, pandan essence, right? I cannot tell how many grams because you use different brand, right? The taste totally different. So some brand, right? You put maybe 2-3 grams. The other brand you might have to put 5 to 6 grams. It very depends on the brand, so you have to try yourself. All right. So guys, you see the meringue, we beat until firm peak. The structure is firm. Before we fold, right, just pour a small mixture into the meringue to make it slightly softer, easier to fold well. So when we fold, you don't have lumps afterwards. Okay. Now I do have recipes for exactly 160 times 40 tray, guys. You'll get a thickness around 1 centimeter thick. So you see after done, the mixture texture is going to be very smooth. Then over here I have a flexi pan, 60 times 40. Just nice for one tray. Well, spread it. Then I will push a little bit more in the beginning. Then we can use a ruler to scrape it. Then guys, this one right, we are going to bake with 160 to 165 degrees inside the oven for around 15 minutes, trigger in. Then after that, turn around the tray and bake with another 2 to 3 minutes, trigger out. Okay, so total is around 17 to 18 minutes, okay? One more thing. Then one more small trick for you all. For baking this sponge, right, if you want to keep the color, you put it double tray like this way. So the top part is going to bake more, but the bottom part, because of double tray, right, we are going to bake slightly lesser. The color are going to remain. It's not going to be very brown at the bottom part, so we get a nice color of the sponge. Okay? We don't need to turn that. We eat one tray is fine.
Can I add more pandan leaf to get stronger pandan flavor?
But you can add more pandan leaf to get stronger flavor if you want.
So this lady mentioned that she doesn't have 60/40 the tray size. So how do you do about it? Let's say they don't have
But you adjust the recipe to according to the tray that you have. But for the recipe I gave you, right, you cannot go too low. Otherwise, you can do maybe 0.7 is the minimum amount from the recipe I gave. 0.4 from the recipe I gave you. 0.4 is the minimum, because if you do smaller than that, right, it's not going to be stable.
What is the shoe mixture temperature before folding the meringue?
It will be slightly warm, between 40 to 50 degrees. But usually I don't see that. I just have to make sure in the beginning when you cook the flour with butter, have to cook properly. And the moment when you add in the warm liquid, you have to make sure the liquid is warm and let the liquid cook a little bit of the flour. That is the most important.
What is trigger in and trigger out? And then does all of the things that you bake using the combi oven?
Yes, for this class, everything I bake by using combi oven. Okay, trigger in, trigger out. Wilson, can you follow me to oven there? Cannot follow. Okay, for trigger in and out, right, is a function for the oven. Usually, trigger in, we make sure the oven is tight. There's no air release from the oven. Trigger out means when we pull out, there's a small function for oven. When we pull out, right, they will leave a small hole inside the oven. So when we bake something, right, the steam will goes out continuous. It's very small hole, but no headache. If your oven cannot do that, you just make sure you close the oven properly. That's it. You can use pandan essence, like I explained, but the amount you have to adjust. Okay, so guys, now I'm gonna, you turn to page 6. I'm gonna start to do a pandan cream mousse. For the pandan cream mousse, right, I'm using the, if you see there's a gula melaka or palm sugar. So the palm sugar looks like this. Okay. If you want stronger flavor of palm sugar, you use the palm sugar which is darker color and a little bit soft, not too hard, which means they are mixing less crystal sugar inside and the flavor are going to be stronger. So in Malaysia, we are using a lot of palm sugar for our dessert or sweets. That's why when I have the brand of the Enchanté, I try to use some local flavor inside. Palm sugar is one of the type that very popular in Malaysia or even Asia. Okay, so it gives you very unique taste. Slightly similar to molasses, but not exactly same with molasses, because molasses, right, we cannot eat too much. We cannot consume too much every day, otherwise, right, our stomach cannot stand with it. But for palm sugar is more, we can accept more. We can eat a little bit more, but without affect our stomach. Also, it's less sweet. with a lot of flavor inside. So over here, right, for the pandan cream mousse, same way, we are going to infuse the pandan leaf and milk together, warm up, and after that blend it. So to save the time, I already done. So you see over here, I already blend nicely. Okay. Then put the palm sugar inside to melt it. So now I have to melt the palm sugar. Once it melts, right, I have to strain again. Because the palm sugar, right, when they prepare, they have to dry it up. And during the drying, right, maybe depends on brand to brand, from factory to factory. Somehow when homemade or small portion of a company, right, when they produce a palm sugar, they are not as clean, but this kind of palm sugar give you a lot of flavor. So I will always heat it up to melt it and strain again to make sure I pasteurize properly before I use. So I cut the palm sugar small and mix into the pandan milk. Then it melts. And the other side, right, put the sugar, corn flour, salt together, mix with the egg yolk. We are going to prepare like a pastry cream. Mix well until the egg yolk mixture becomes whitish. If let's say example you don't have palm sugar, right, you can use coconut sugar to replace it, no problem. Okay, now the mixture is melted. I'm going to strain it out. To make sure there's no chunks inside the gula melaka. Alright, so now I'm gonna proceed like a pastry cream. Brings to boil first the liquid. I prepared the tray for cooling down the mixture later. Alright, now boiling. Off the heat. Pour little bit into the egg mixture. Mix well and pour back. Mix well first before we recook again. Alright, by using a low heat, we are going to recook nicely. Now we have to bring to boil. Make sure it boil nicely, yeah. Otherwise, right, later we have a texture of the cornstarch. Alright, now it's boiling. Boil for around 10 seconds. Alright. To avoid lumps, right, At this point, while it's still hot, we are going to blend with the blender. Because the amount is slightly bigger at this moment, I'm going to use a Robocode to blend it. Like this way, right, we can make sure the mixture is really smooth. Scrap and blend a little bit more. Okay, while it becomes smooth, right, and you will see it becomes slightly more liquid after we blend. We cool it down on the tray. If you are not rushing, you can leave inside the bowl to cool down. Because I want to make it faster, I will cool down on the tray. Cool down to below 40 degrees, I'm gonna mix in the butter. Remember earlier, when we do the other cream mousse I mentioned to you, we don't need to cool down for that butter because the amount very small. This amount is much bigger. So if you put the butter at this moment, it's too hot, we are going to melt the butter. The texture are going to be different. So if you want it to be very creamy, it's always better we cool it down to 40 degrees or below, then we blend in the butter. So I'm gonna keep inside the blast freezer for 5 minutes, then it's going to cool down. So while waiting for the mixture to cool down, so guys, you see for the Pandan shoe sponge, after bake, right, once we take out from the oven, we transfer directly on the wire rack because we don't want the bottom to change color. Then we can, while it's still hot, we can put a layer of the cling film to stick on top like this way. Then we can leave it cool down and keep inside the chiller. Like this will help later when it's cooled down, right, we can remove the cling film and it will take out the skin. But if you want to keep the skin, you can leave it just open like this way, let it cool down. Because this one, sometimes we want to use for the roll cake, we want to have a skin, you can do like this way. Just leave it open until it's totally cooled down. So this one I'm going to keep inside the chiller, let it cool down. And guys, while waiting, right, you turn to page 5 for the mango and passion fruit confit. This one I pre-prepared because it's same way as we do the red fruit confit or red fruit jelly, almost same. So you see, right, in the beginning we put the mango puree, passion fruit puree inside the pot. Then corn flour, sugar we mix together and put inside the puree. So this recipe, right, we don't use any pectin, we use corn flour and gelatin. So if you don't have any pectin, right, NH pectin, you can use confit or jelly with this kind of recipe. Okay, so I already passed you 3 different types of recipe. One is setting by the pectin with xanthan. Then after that, the next one, NH pectin. And the last one of the confit is with only gelatin and corn flour. The texture for this confit is very similar to the one you use pectin to set. So the method is easy, like you follow the method as we have inside the procedure. You mix the corn flour and sugar together, then mix into the mango and passion fruit puree. Make sure it's melted, mix well, and continue cook to boil. Once it boils, add in the gelatin mass Then after done already, I put inside the sphere or round mold to become like this. Fu, can pass me the passion fruit and mango confit. So after you keep inside the mold and freeze it, we are going to have a round ball like this to put on top as a decoration and give some flavor to make the cake more refreshing. So I put two different size, big and small. For the finishing, it will look much nicer. If you want to buy the mold, you check any silicone mold brand. They usually have different size you can choose. Okay, can take out the pandan cream, I think should be okay. And for pandan cream right here, I have the butter. Came in the room, so it's soft, creamy. So right now, it's still slightly warm, okay, but it's not hot anymore. The temperature, I will check. It's around 40 degrees, good. So I'm gonna put it into the blender. I mean, you can also use the hand blender, but because the amount is slightly bigger, right, it's quite difficult to blend with a hand blender. Food processor is much easier for this way. Then put the butter inside. Blend until everything emulsifies and becomes smooth. All right. So after done, right, we can keep this inside the chiller for later use. For the pandan creamer, after done, we keep inside the chiller, wrap it nicely, reserve for later use. Then for the next recipe, right, I'm going to prepare the same page caramel sauce. For the caramel sauce, right, first I'm gonna put the cream and the coconut puree together, put inside the microwave to warm it up, to make it hot. Hello, checking. And the other side, for the pots here, I'm gonna put the water, sugar, and glucose together. So guys, I repeat again for the caramel sauce. First, put the cream and coconut puree inside the microwave to heat it up, or you can use a pot to warm it up. Then over here I have a water, sugar, and glucose. Put inside the pot. So I'm gonna cook the syrup into the caramel first. Again, same. We can stir once a while, don't stir too much. I'm going to cook a caramel, usually a temperature around 180 degrees, okay? Or a brown caramel if you want to have a strong taste. Salt and butter, I'm gonna add after. If you want, you can put a salt in the beginning, but my habit, I don't put the salt in the beginning with the caramel too much because sometimes you lose the flavor of the salt. So I prefer to put it after. So right now the coconut puree and the cream already warm up. Make sure it's hot, huh? So later when we deglaze, right, the sugar is not going to set. This will take a while. Are there any questions they are asking?
Why Pandan has astringent taste when using too much Pandan?
Strange taste, you mean?
Astringent.
What is astringent? Too deep. Pahit. Now, guys, anything, let's say example, for tea. If you, today you brew a tea, you put too much tea leaf, what happen? It's normal, if you put too much of certain flavor to infuse, right? The acidic and the, I would say, I don't know how to call it, but the bitterness of the taste, right, will come inside. So don't put too much. You can put the right amount. The moment you start to feel slightly bitterness or acidic taste of that particular infusion, you have to reduce the product that we are going to infuse.
Will the Pandan cream have the same texture if you don't blend in the food processor rather with hand?
No, it will be different because if you blend it right, because the amount of fat is a lot, the butter is a lot. If you don't blend it nicely, right, the, sorry guys, it's caramel already. I have to go. Later I explain again. So now when we have the brown caramel, add in the butter first. Reduce to low heat, guys. So butter can cool down the caramel. Azar, later you ask me the question again. Let me finish this one first. Okay, after we have butter, salt. Salt you can put before butter, after butter, doesn't really matter. Then the hot liquid. Don't pour everything one time. Pour half first. I haven't off the heat, I just reduced to a low heat, guys. Alright. Remaining of the liquid. And now I have to recook it again to 103 degrees. The reason we recook, right, is to make sure we have a good consistency. Always, because if you don't recook right, sometimes when you have high heat, when you pour the liquid, right, they evaporate more, sometimes a bit less, so you don't get a good consistency of a sauce. Now, by medium heat to recook again, right, we get a good consistency usually. And this we have to check with a thermometer. What they asked us just now, Azhar? The last question.
The Pandan cream has the same texture if you don't blend in the food processor.
Okay. If for the pandan cream, because the butter is a lot, if you don't use a blender, right, the texture is not going to be the same. It's always must to have a blender. A food processor, okay, or worse to worse, you use a hand blender. But hand blender, with that amount, it's going to be difficult to blend. Alright, so 103 degrees Celsius. Now I'm going to transfer into a bowl. And I'm going to wait for it to cool down. Once it cool down to around 50 or 40 degrees, right, I'm going to blend it. Between 40 to 50 degrees, I'm going to blend it. Because now if you blend right, they are still too hot. The fat from the cream and the coconut puree is difficult to emulsify, so we have to cool it down. Same way guys, if you don't blend this one, the texture is not that creamy. If you blend it properly, you're going to get a very creamy texture. So now I'm going to wrap it touching the surface, keep inside a chiller to cool it down. Any other question?
What are the flavors that match with Pandan? For example, if someone uses mango or cashew jelly, can we use
Red fruit, red fruit with pandan, not really. I don't like red fruit with pandan. Apricot myself, I don't like it. So I think mango is nice, coconut is nice, pandan like taro also nice. What else? Something not too acidic. I think it's always nice with pandan, but apricot, I think so. And also red fruit, I don't try red fruit. I don't think it's suitable. Something more to the sweeter taste of the fruits is better than very acidic one. Because the one I have mango passion fruit, passion fruit amount is very less. If you put a lot of passion fruit, right, it's not nice also.
If we don't have sugar in and out option in the oven, what temperature do we bake?
Same temperature, don't change. But if you have a home oven, right, small one, depends, because I think you try Apka Chef online, you will see the temperature will give you. Sometimes you have a small oven, it's too hot because the heat coming in very fast, so you might have to reduce. Every oven is different, so I cannot tell you exactly what temperature. Temperature will give you is a guideline, okay? You might have to adjust between 5 to 10. Somehow, you might have to adjust 20 degrees. Depends on the oven. The smaller, usually the hotter.
Can we use the silicone mold for the mango passion fruit coffee?
Oh, can. Later, tomorrow I show you because I didn't bring here. I have, sorry. Wow. The translator, sorry, the admin and assistant better than me. So this is the mold that for the mango confit. Don't ask me where to buy. You go Shopee or Taobao a lot.
How to do coconut puree?
How to do coconut? I never do coconut puree before. Basically, right, as so far I understand how to they prepare. They take coconut water and the meat, everything blend. That's coconut puree. Coconut cream, different. Coconut cream, they don't have the juice. They take out the juice. Coconut puree have the juice and the meat. Okay?
Is coconut puree sweet?
Sweet, you have a juice, because if the juice is sweet, then sweet.
So the meat that you mentioned, is it like
Coconut.
tender coconut and tender coconut water? Is it the young coconut or the old coconut?
I don't know. I'm not the coconut supplier. How I know? You can use both. I think it works, but just if different brands, different. Okay. Don't headache to make the coconut. If you don't have coconut puree, you just use coconut milk. Okay. Let's say that it works. It works. Why I use coconut puree? First reason, because it's more refreshing. So my coconut, my caramel or whatever I do, the taste is going to be lighter. Okay, because I don't like the coconut somehow is too oily or too fattening when you eat. That's why I don't use coconut milk or coconut cream. But if you want to save cost, coconut milk is a good substitute to coconut puree. The price is going to be just quarters of the coconut puree. Okay, then now I'm going to, what I'm going to do? Oh, now I'm going to continue the blossom, guys. You turn the page to the blossom. Page 8. Now I'm going to layer it. The vanilla and white chocolate mousse. 这放齐了先。底下我讲看。把它崩。怎么？不用讲，我马上要做了。你帮我transfer去mixing bowl 可以吗？So guys, for the vanilla and white chocolate mousse, right? You see the recipe, right? We have inside we have a patabom. So the patabom recipe is at the bottom. Okay, so I'm gonna first prepare the patabom first because it will take some time to prepare. Put the water, milk powder, and for the glucose, right? I have to warm up a little bit. glucose together. I'm gonna warm it up to get like a milk. Alright, we put the milk powder, water and glucose together. First, heat it up. Okay, so once the mixture is hot, right, like how we do the anglaise, okay, we pull back. Okay, now have to cook to the recipe over here, right now cook to 83 degrees. You change, guys, cook to 70 to 75 degrees is enough. Don't need to cook to 83. So just make sure it's 70 to 75. And make sure we use a low heat to cook. And if you are worried that you overcook it, right, you double boil it, it's safer. Alright. By using a whisk, we are going to whip it up. Be careful, we don't want to overcook too much. Sorry, we don't want to overcook it. If you overcook it, right, when you whip, right, it's not going to raise up. So by using the fast speed, wait until it's cooled down and raise up. Then the other side, I'm gonna cook the anglaise. Put the cream. Vanilla bean. Alright. Then bring the mixture to boil. It's very straightforward, guys. It's like a creme anglaise, but without sugar. Because for this recipe, we already have white chocolate. It's quite sweet already. That's why there's no sugar inside the recipe. Alright, start to boil. Pour a little bit into the yolk. Then pour back. And for this, right, we have to recook to 83 degrees Celsius. With low heat, guys, we don't want to overcook it. Alright. Mix a while to make sure there's no catches at the bottom. Add in the gelatin. And pour over the white chocolate. Mix well. We can use a whisk to mix because we are going to make a mousse, so we don't need to worry that a lot of air bubble. And the other side, right, I'm gonna whip up the whipped cream. Semi-whip. Or 60% whip, guys. Don't whip it too firm, otherwise later our mousse is not creamy enough. I'm going to show you how's the texture. And for the anglaise, right, we are going to blend it. So basically, very straightforward, guys. We have a cream anglaise base for the white chocolate, pata bomb, and whipped cream to make it lighter. For this recipe, right, we're adding the pata bomb is to make it smoother. The texture is going to be more creamy. If a recipe without a pata bomb, just the whipped cream, it can be light, but the texture is not as smooth, not as creamy. So blend nicely. And before we fold the whipped cream, right, we have to check the temperature to make sure the mixture is not higher than 35 degrees. If it's higher than 35 degrees, right, it's going to melt the whipped cream. So now it's 30, it's good. Alright. So for the whipped cream, as you can see, we whip until it holds the shape a little bit, but not too firm. It will drop. And when you shake, right, it's going to be flat. Okay? So I'm going to fold in the whipped cream first, then followed by the pata bomb. By using a whisk, alright. Then now pour in the pata bomb. So you see guys, the pata bomb can be slightly airy, but it's not going to be super airy. They are still slightly liquid, okay? For the pata bomb, I would suggest to fold with the spatula. Alright, so just mix it well. Just get the filling for the blossom. So we pour half of the mousse into the ring or mold. Don't pour too much because for blossom, right, I don't want to fill up until top of the mold because we are going to have vanilla chantilly on top. The one just now I make. So guys, we have the red fruit jelly and also the vanilla sponge. Just place it slowly. Don't press too much because the mousse is liquid, so we don't need to press a lot. Just let it slowly goes in. Then little bit of the mousse at the middle. Really cover everywhere. As you can see, I didn't pour until full because I want to keep a gap. Then the almond croissant, push a little bit to make sure it's flat, okay? Alright, so after just clean the side a little bit to make sure it's even. The recipe I gave you, right, usually can make 3 cakes, guys, but I want to make it faster, so I don't make 3 cakes. Alright, so now I'm gonna put inside the blast freezer.
What is the added value of this powder to the pate?
If this recipe, right, the pata bomb of this recipe, you don't have a milk powder. When you whip, right, it's not going to raise up nicely. So one is for the flavor, but another part, bigger part, is to make sure it raises up properly for aeration purpose. Any other question?
What brand might
We are sponsored by Calibot, so Calibot. Who help me to get the red color cocoa butter? It's actually quite straightforward, guys. First, the vanilla mousse until half of the mold. Then you put in the filling, which is the red fruit tea jelly and also the vanilla sponge put inside already. Then let it goes to flat. Make sure the mousse cover to the side. Then pour a little bit of the mousse and cover with the almond croissant. Okay. Just guys, here I skip, like I told you earlier, I don't put any more the vanilla cream milk because I don't find it's huge difference. That's why for the shop or whatever I took out already. This is just I haven't changed, I put it inside. Okay. Yep. You can put the crispy base at the bottom or almond sponge at the bottom, doesn't make difference. Because when you're cutting it's the same. Just I want to make the crust go smoother, I change. Because if I want to put the sponge at the bottom right, I have to spread the crispy layer on top of the sponge. Just now because the sponge is not done yet, so I cannot do so. Okay? There's no difference. When I build a cake, right, most important is we have to start from soft to firm. Okay, so when we cut, there's no problem. But crispy and sponge, as long as if your sponge is firm enough, you can put the crispy thin layers on top of a sponge. It doesn't make it difficult to cut. Okay? So don't get confused. For either way, it works for this few type of cake. Provided if you have a sponge which is super soft like the shoe sponge, and then I will ask you try to put the crispy below of the sponge, because if you put a crispy on top of the sponge, they might make the sponge mash up because sponge is too soft. But in this case and the jacon, no problem. So for building the Senzu, right, if you see from a picture, there is a red color on half of the picture, half of a cake. So now I'm gonna make the design on top of the cake first. Over here I have a tempered cocoa butter, red color. So from far right, we spray the dots. Listen, you can see. Okay, don't too much, just a little bit like this will be enough. Then after that, spray a little bit on one side of the mold. So guys, simple as that. Big dots and one side of the spraying to make it reddish. So now I'm gonna keep in the AC room for 5 minutes to let it set, okay? Now I will start to prepare the mousse. So guys, for the Senzu, page 13. Page 14, cream cheese mousse. Over here, we have a pata bomb, but different way of preparation. So I show you two different kind of base, okay? The reason for this recipe, we are using this pata bomb because this pata bomb is more airy. But the problem is you need to have certain amount of sugar to prepare it. If we use this pata bomb for just now the blossom vanilla mousse, right, it's not so suitable because this one is sweeter. But for this particular recipe, it's suitable because they are more airy. And the recipe, there's no much white chocolate, so it's fine. So logically it's interchangeable, but just previous one is sweeter, so I don't want to use the recipe with pata bomb with a lot of sugar. Okay. So first I'm gonna mix the cream cheese with icing sugar in a mixing bowl to make sure we mix until there's no lumps. Okay. Then vanilla bean also. It's okay, Azan? Okay, we cream it until it's soft and creamy. Okay, the other side, right, I'm gonna prepare the pata bomb again. For the pata bomb, right, we have to put the yolk inside the mixing bowl and whip it up. This preparation pata bomb, right, is a bit different with earlier. This one, we are going to cook a syrup to 120 degrees, then pour over the egg yolk, a bit like Italian meringue, but using egg yolk. So we have to whip it up for the pata bomb first. Then the other side, put the sugar water to cook a syrup. 120 degrees Celsius. But make sure, guys, when we start, right, we have to start the yolk the same time or the yolk a bit earlier. So like this way, right, when we want to pour the syrup into the egg yolk, right, the egg yolk already raised up a little bit. Otherwise, we are going to overcook it easily. And when we prepare the syrup, right, try to use a medium heat instead of a high heat. Otherwise, right, when you reach 120 degrees, right, it's too soon. The sugar haven't fully dissolved. Alright, 120 degrees Celsius. Pour from the side slowly into the mixer. It's important we pour from the side. Otherwise, right, when you contact with the whisk, right, the syrup is not going to mix into the yolk, but it's going to stick on the side of the bowl. So make sure we always pour from the side nicely. Then continue whip until it raise up and cool down to room temperature. So the other side, right, for the cream cheese part, I'm gonna melt the gelatin and mix with the cream cheese. So I will transfer the cream cheese into a bowl first. First, pour a bit of cream cheese into the gelatin, right, to mix it well first. It's going to be easier to mix like this way. Because now the cream cheese, right, if it's a little bit cold, when you put the gelatin, right, the gelatin might set by itself. So always put like this way to make sure the cream cheese is warm up a little bit and the temperature is closer with the gelatin. Then pour over the cream cheese. Then by using a whisk, right, mix it well. Okay, when you see the mixture is lumpy, right, it means it's too cold. We have to microwave a little bit to make it a little bit warmer. Okay. So guys, warm up the. You see after warm up, right, the texture is smoother. There's no lumps on the cream cheese. Alright. So over here, right, I have the whipped cream already whipped up, semi-whipped like earlier stage that I mentioned to you for the blossom. Now I'm gonna fold the whipped cream inside, then followed by the pata bomb. And make sure when you want to fold the whipped cream, right, the mixture of the cream cheese, right, is not higher than 35 degrees. Otherwise, later your whipped cream is going to melt. Charles, you help me to check with Fufu. Where is the almond croissant that she made for me the other day? Fold nicely. At this point, right, you will see the mixture is kind of firm because we haven't folded in the pata bomb. And now, because the mixture is quite cold with the whipped cream, everything. And last, we are going to fold in the pata bomb. So you see, right, for this pata bomb, right, the mixture is thicker, it's more airy. But only problem is this recipe is more sugar, so we cannot interchange with the pata bomb inside the blossom. And now we just fold the pata bomb inside. Just for this one, the recipe we do is times how much? 0.7. So guys, the recipe of the mousse, right, is 0.7. I didn't do the full recipe of inside the books because that is usually give you 4 cakes. Now over here I just have to do 2 cakes, so I times 0 for 0.7. But it's already the minimum amount you can do. Otherwise, right, your pata bomb is not going to whip up nicely. It's very less. So as you see, when I right, when I mix in the pata bomb, right, I try to use a spatula instead of a whisk. So we can mix a little bit more without collapsing it. Okay, and after we adding in the pata bomb, right, you see the mixture is going to be more creamy, not so firm. And now we can start to build the cake. So same way, pour almost half of the mousse. Into the into the mold. Because this mousse right is a bit thicker, so make sure using a spoon to tap it to make sure there's no air bubble. Can you pass me the filling? Alright, over here I have the filling for the Senzu. So as you can see, we have compote, cream mousse and almond jacon. Just push inside because the mousse is a bit firmer, so we have to make sure we push until the mousse coming to the side of the filling. Then by using a piping bag, to stick with the crispy base. Or the almond croissant. Make sure it's level with the mold. So now I'm gonna freeze it. When you want to unmold, right, if you have a cocoa butter like this, if you want to unmold, you have to make sure it's really cold. In the blast freezer is possible. Otherwise, right, the cocoa butter are not going to stick nicely. So guys, any question for the Senzu? If no question, got it. For Pandan, a bit of skin, no problem.
What is the temperature of the velvet spray?
It have to be tempered, so usually use it between 30 to 32 degrees Celsius.
Can I have the
这个你帮我
brand
背。
of the spray gun?
没有事。嗯
Can I have the brand of the spray gun?
But I buy from a local hardware shop. There's no brand. If you want to have a good brand, usually Kinki is good. Then there's another brand from China called Akoko, also very good quality.
So all the recipes can good for 4 cakes?
Not all, okay? Only the other recipe all is good for 3 cakes, okay? Only the mousse of this particular is 4 cakes because small amount very difficult to do.
So you only do 70%?
70%. Oh no, for Senzu is full. For Senzu is full. For Blossom is 70% because Blossom on top have another layers. Just can I have a towel? What is inside? You see this? It's okay. I can pass me the coconut chantilly. 两片一块 coconut chantilly 做好了。
What is the spray color?
Skip.
Please repeat the mousse procedure.
But follow the recipe. So first, paddle cream cheese and the icing sugar. Then the other side can prepare the pata bomb. So once paddle nicely, right, mix the gelatin into the cream cheese mixture, mix nicely, then fold in the whipped cream and followed by the patapum.
If we don't have glass freezer, how long to freeze in normal freezer?
But you have to depend on your freezer. I would say each layer 1 day.
After the cream cheese, at what temperature should it be served?
At what chiller temperature? For all the cake today, right? Beside the travel cake, the other things chiller temperature serving. Done? Okay. So guys, after that 2 cake, now I'm gonna start to layer the pandan layer cake. So for pandan layer cake is which page? Page 5. So we have everything already. For the coconut chantilly, right? Just now I show you how to make the vanilla chantilly, right? For coconut chantilly, very similar, so I pre-prepared. So now I can layer it straight away. So I explained you how to do a coconut chantilly first. Infuse the desiccated coconut with the coconut milk and coconut cream for 5 hours. Okay, if you want, you can leave it overnight. So after that, you strain it out and rescale again the total amount of the cream and the coconut puree. You need suppose right 1 kilo 300, around 1.4 kilo. Okay, after strain. If it's not enough, you use the coconut puree to replace. Okay, then after that, simple, just mix in the sorry guys, sorry, it's wrong. One more time. First, infuse the coconut puree with the toasted desiccated coconut. Okay, for 5 hours. You ignore the coconut cream in the procedure. There's no coconut cream over here. First, infuse only the coconut puree and the desiccated coconut toasted one for 5 hours. After you see the infused, we use 600 grams. After you strain it out, make sure you have 462 grams. If you don't have, you just add back the coconut puree to make sure it's 462. After that, use this mixture to cook together with sugar to dissolve the sugar and add in the gelatin mass. Afterwards, add in the cream, cold cream. The cream have to be cold like just now the vanilla chantilly. You blend everything together. Keep minimum 8 hours, or keep overnight also can, like keep overnight. So you will get a texture like this, like a curd. Okay, because gelatin start to set like this way, right? The cream will whip up, right? The structure is better, easier for us to pipe. Same for the vanilla chantilly. Tomorrow you see, right? The texture is going to become like this. And myself, I like to have a taste with the toasted desiccated coconut. That's why I infuse it. If you don't want to have extra toasted taste, you can just straight away use a coconut puree with 462. It works straight away. Don't need to infuse. It works also. Just the taste will be a little bit different. So now I'm gonna start to whip up the chantilly. Pass me the sponge, everything. And can pass me the brown color, silicone. The sponge, just pass me the sponge also. Yeah, come. Keep in the blast freezer. Yeah, because it's too moist, right? It stick with the later is. So we are going to whip the chantilly until it's piping consistency or spreadable. Then I'm going to start to layer. So guys, for the layering, right, you can see the amount of the chantilly we need 200 grams per layer. Okay. Then we have 3 layers. Alright, now our texture is okay. So you can see the consistency. It holds the shape but not too firm. Okay. A little bit like soft peak meringue. One by Charles, there's one piece one, right? Don't take out the other 2. $200 grams. Guys, the frame rate is 30 times 40, which is the half tray size. Okay, so one sponge is 60 times 40. You cut to half. Then make sure spread evenly, so the layers will be nice later. This one just blast freezer. And after spread already, guys, put inside the blast freezer to let it set. Then I can spread the cream mold afterwards. Then get the other 2, also same way, 200 grams. Alright. So guys, I'm going to keep the sponge and the chantilly inside the freezer until it's really hard, properly frozen. Then I'm going to layer with the cream mousse. Then while waiting for it, right, I'm going to continue for the next one. Okay guys, while waiting for the pandan layer cake to freeze, right, I'm going to move to the next one. You turn your page to 11, apple and yuzu tablets. So I'm gonna start with, page 12, yuzu candy apple. For the yuzu candy apple, right, I already pre-prepared. Over here, I put water, sugar and yuzu puree together. Okay, brings to boil to make a syrup, which is over here. Then the green apple, I'm going to peel it. So for a green apple, right, we slice half, slice to quarters, and cut off the seed, and cut to 2 again. So in total, right, 1 apple we can cut to 8. Okay, like this. So guys, for this recipe, right, we must use a green apple. If you use a red apple, right, will be different because the acidity will be different. So it won't work with the red apple. And the other side, I'm gonna put the sugar. You see, first, right, we have 2 sugar in this recipe. Big sugar is for the syrup, okay, to give a sweetness. Then small sugar, right, is to mix with pectin. Make sure we mix nicely with pectin. So now we have to wait for the syrup to boil. Again, if you don't have a yuzu puree, you can use a lemon over here. And if you don't want to have a lemon or citrus flavor, right, but this one you can do caramel. And if you don't want apple, you can use pear. But the only difference is the amount of pectin, right, have to change. If you have something acidic over here and if you have apple already have pectin inside, so we don't need to use so much. But if you change it, let's say you want to have pear, you have to double up the amount of pectin. Okay? And if you are not using the citrus over here, you are using something not acidic like caramel or whatever, right? You have to, same also, you have to adjust the amount of pectin to make sure it's set properly. Usually if I do the caramel pear or caramel apple, I have to double up the amount of pectin. Basically the syrup, right, is to make sure we have the flavor. It will slowly goes into the apple. Then here, right, is later after we soak the apple. When it's soft already, right, we are going to mix with the sugar pectin. What should be the fat percentage of cream? 35 or 35.5. This is basically the cream we are using. Okay.
What is the shelf life of the cake?
But if you keep the cake, what we done, right, inside the freezer, you can keep 1 month, 2 months, no problem. But for me, if a production I want to have, right, I prefer to keep it 2 weeks inside the freezer. Try to sell it as soon as possible. It's not going to spoil, but it's going to be very fresh.
Sorry, I'm not confused. How much coconut milk is necessary for the ingredient?
Follow the recipe. The recipe asks 642. You follow 642.
The one that you have the rectangular transform, where can you buy it?
But online, you can buy from Sasa Demal or you can buy from the Medfer. Okay, expensive.
How to preserve the cake in good condition?
How to preserve the cake in good condition? Airtight, wrap it properly in the freezer. Okay, and if possible, you don't unmold it. But if you don't have so much mold, you have to unmold and while it's really frozen and wrap it nicely.
The recipe here is 88 apples. It's written that the big amount of sugar is 300, but the method here is 1,400 grams sugar.
Sorry, because I divided already. The recipe I give you is divided by 4. Sorry, I forgot to check the procedure. So the procedure is same, guys. Just the recipe I gave you is already divided by 4. Original recipe very big. What else? No? Okay. Alright, now the syrup is boiling. I'm going to add in the apple. And guys, once you add in the apple, right, here is the most important part. Reduce the heat to medium low. We want to simmer the apple for around 10 minutes, okay? But not boiling the apple. If you boil the apple for a long time, right, you will start to see the apple will mash up. We don't want to mash. We want to keep the temperature around 90 degrees. And let it soak for 10 minutes with the low heat, okay? After 10 minutes, we off the heat. Let the apple sit inside the syrup overnight. This is really important because in the beginning, we need the heat to make sure the syrup slowly goes into the apple, so the apple will become slightly acidic. Second, we need time, which is overnight, to let the syrup slowly goes into apple slowly. If you skip that, later when we mix the sugar pectin, right, the mixture is not going to set properly. Okay, so to make the step faster, right, I already have can take out the one I already pre-prepared. I already pre-prepared soak earlier the apple. So you will see, right, the mixture, the apples become slightly transparent at the side. Okay, it's not going to be the same like this. This I have to let it soak 10 minutes. So after we prepare like this already, right, put in the sugar pectin. This is the amount same. I have the green apple 525 grams. Okay, then mix in the sugar pectin by using hand just to mix well. Be careful, don't mash out the apple too much because now the apple is slightly softer. This is really important, guys. So at this way, right, we make sure the apple will set properly. Because the preparation time I put a little bit extra, I'm gonna put inside, so less wastage. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to wash my hand a little bit. Then I start to put inside the mold. So over here, right, I have a silicone mold, dome shape. I'm going to place the apple inside. The size is around 7 cm. So make sure, right, we put the apple enough to make sure it's even. Because, right, after we bake, right, after we bake this one, right, because now the time is short, usually after I place, right, I'm gonna bake it. But this one I'm gonna bake it by tomorrow morning. So usually after we line out everything, right, when we bake, they are going to reduce a little bit. So because the liquid are going to evaporate, so we have to make sure we place it really full So when you reduce, right, you still get a good shape. So usually with 7 cm mold, right, it's just nice. We can put 4 slices of the apple inside. And because the apple start to be soft a little bit, so it's easy, we can just push and make it flat. Just you can take out the cream milk, pandan cream milk. Start to set, okay. Guys, it's important when we put, right, make sure we press to make sure the juice and the apple, which is highly mashed up already one, right, it comes out to make sure the mold is flat. So at this way, right, we can get a nice dome. If you don't press nicely, later, tomorrow after we bake, right, when we unmold, you'll see there's a hole inside. Okay, I'm gonna ask the assistant help me to fill up for everything. I'm gonna keep, and tomorrow I'm gonna bake it before the class so I can show you during the class how it looks like. And guys, so now the apple is already cooked for around 10 minutes. You see, because we are only use a low heat, the apple is not mushy, it still remain like this. So now we are going to leave it inside the hot liquid, wrap it nicely and leave overnight inside the chiller. So tomorrow you'll see the outside, right, will have a layer which is highly transparent. Alright, so now I'm gonna start to build continue to build the pandan layer cake. For the pandan cream mousse, right, we need 120 grams per layers. After we chill it, it starts to be more creamy and also a little bit elastic. We are going to mash out a little bit, so it's easy to spread. So now I'm gonna scale 120 grams to spread on top. It's just a very thin layers. Can pass me another sponge, but already spread the chantilly one. Okay. Put it back. Thank you. So, put another layers of sponge. It's slightly bigger. I have to cut a little bit. Alright. Make sure we press nicely to make sure it's even. Because this cake, right, after we done right, we can see the layers. If it's not even right, it doesn't look as nice. Alright. If you do at home, right, if you are not rushing, right, actually you can put one layers, then freeze, put one layers and freeze, and put one layers and freeze, but it just takes longer time, so I prefer to do like this way. Just you can get another. Little bit too much. Make sure press nicely so it's even and the cream is going to stick well. Alright, then the last layers. Okay, can take out the sponge. So the leftover cream mold, right, we are going to keep it. Don't throw first because tomorrow for the top part, we still have to pipe some. So guys, for the last layer, right, we have to make sure we place it overturn like this way, so we get a smooth surface on top and the bottom is a bit too big. I have to trim a little bit more. Myself, I like to work with the frozen sponge, so it's going to be more flat. And it's going to be more even when we layer it. So get the hand scraper, you can push it nicely. and make sure it sticks well. Or we can use a cake smoother also. Just put a cling film on top, then use cake smoother to smooth it down. It works. Alright, so now I'm gonna wrap it and keep inside the freezer overnight. Tomorrow, right, once it's frozen, I'm going to cut to the size that I want, then start to pipe the top part. Okay, so now this is done. So it comes to the last recipe of today. So guys, turn to page 19. I think it's the last page. Oh no, 19, yep. Okay, we have for the glaze, right, I'm going to show you the neutral glaze for spray. And if you see after that, right, you have another neutral glaze. That one is for glaze. The preparing method exactly same. So I'm going to show you just one of it, okay? For the spray neutral glaze, right, first put the water into the pot. We have to warm our glucose. And over here, right, I have a citric acid solution. The citric acid solution, right, means a part of water mixed with a part of citric acid. Okay, let's say now we have 10 grams of water mixed with 10 grams of citric acid. Just let it dissolve like this. Okay, the glucose, right, if you want to be easier, I will just mix into the water. It doesn't make difference if you add now and add after. And take out a small part of sugar mixed with pectin. The remaining, right, can put inside the syrup. Basically, just put everything inside. We are going to warm up. Then last, we add in the citric acid solution. Now I'll warm. Once the glucose melted around 40 to 50 degrees, right, I'm going to add in the sugar pectin slowly. If you add the glucose after, it works the same, no difference. I tried both, it works, so no worries. So we'll warm it up first. When we see there's a steam and the glucose melted, I'm going to add in sugar pectin mixture. And guys, this neutral glaze, right, is for spraying. It will be different consistency than the glazing. So tomorrow when I do finishing, you can see the difference, okay? Are there any questions? And then later last, I just explain about the gelatin, then we finish. Alright, now start to be warm up. I'm gonna mix in a sugar pectin mixture. Same. Yuzu and the lemon, you can interchangeable, so no worries.
Can you please repeat the layers of the pandan cake?
But follow the picture. They have a picture there. Exactly same. Just picture is standing. Now I sleeping. So you just put the picture, right. You put the other side to watch. Exactly same. Yep. So right now I'm gonna bring the syrup to boil. Make sure we have a full boil, boil properly. Any other question? No? Good. Later I explain about the gelatin. Guys, you have to make sure we boil until it's clear. Now you can see the syrup is white because the sugar not dissolved yet. So we have to make sure we boil, let it boil nicely. Then you will see it becomes clear afterwards. Then here still have a little bit of glucose. I'm gonna pour the syrup. So it's a small recipe, so I fully utilize everything. Otherwise, most of the time the glucose stick on the container. We are going to use less glucose, so the shininess and the consistency will be slightly different. Alright, so as you can see, right, the syrup becomes transparent. And now I'm going to use a pipette to drop 50 drops, okay? It's difficult to measure with the gram because it's very less. And for now the recipe, I'm going to keep it plain, so you don't need to add coloring inside. Because the recipe that I use for other cakes, so I put a little bit of purple color inside. So 50 drops. Okay. Just mix well. And then leave it inside the chiller for 4 hours. Then we can use it. We want to use it, right? We have to heat it up to 80 degrees. Then we can spray the cake when it's still cold. When the cake is still cold, not the mixture, not the neutral glaze. Tomorrow I'm going to show you. Alright, so for today, right, all the recipe we done. Any question you all want to ask? Then after the question, I'm going to explain to you about the gelatin a little bit. Then we are going to wrap by today. No, it's only cocoa butter with the coloring. Okay. Velvet spray recipe is with cocoa butter. It's for the blossom. Tomorrow we are going to spray velvet.
Do we choose the glaze for tomorrow?
Yes. Done? A lot.
Which layer do we add the coconut caramel?
Tomorrow to pipe to stick with the crispy base and the top. No, I come out, guys. I'm not the person invented shoe sponge. That's it's like jacon. I'm not the person who invented jacon. I just use it and adjust the recipe. In pastry, we are so lucky, you know, guys, because it's been quite a long time pastry exists in this world. So we just to deal, how to say it, because the trend changing, the market changing also. So we just have to make sure ourselves. Myself, I use a classic recipe adjusted to the taste that's suitable for our market. Like if I sell something in Malaysia or if I sell something in Europe, it's going to be different. So I have to make sure I adjust the recipe to suit my market. And that needs a lot of understanding regarding that recipe. For the shoe sponge, I just adjust to the flavor that I like, and also the sweetness that I like, and adjust according to the ingredients that I have. But the basic recipe, I'm not the one who invented it, okay?
What can I replace the cocoa butter for the spray?
But no replaceable. Cocoa butter is cocoa butter. It's like, if I ask you, cocoa butter is ingredients. If you replace it, there's no other ingredients can replace the cocoa butter like this. If you use the cocoa butter substitute, it's different. It doesn't work for this. Okay?
So basically, they say only for the 1%.
Okay. So the last answer for just now you will ask me about gelatin. Okay. Gelatin with the recipe I make over here, gelatin mass or bloom gelatin, all is same with 200 bloom gelatin mixed with 6 parts of water. No matter you have gelatin sheet or gelatin powder, same. Okay? I don't suggest you to change the bloom because for me it's easier to get the gelatin to find the bloom rather than you switch from 200 bloom to 180 bloom, then you have to adjust the recipe. You can adjust the recipe, but it's difficult for me to explain like this. It will take time because with some students, actually I think I do with you all before with the calculation of gelatin. But sorry, I cannot calculate right now because it takes long time to explain. So the class is going to drag another 2 hours if I explain about gelatin. But easier for you to understand, if you have gold gelatin, no matter gelatin sheet or gelatin powder gold, which is 200 bloom to 220 bloom, you use 6 times of water. If you have silver, which is 180 bloom, no matter it's gelatin powder or gelatin sheet, you use 5 times of water. If it's bronze, 140 or 150 bloom, you use 4 times of water. This is simple as that. Don't make yourself confused, okay? And after you add the water, right, now I give you the amount is gelatin mass because I want you to be easier. After you make the gelatin mass, you just take the same amount of gelatin mass, no matter you are gold, silver or bronze, because you are using the water different, right? In the end, you get the amount of the mass. So you don't need to worry you are using bronze, silver or gold. As long as your gelatin mass is using the same amount as what I have, no problem. Okay? Any of them asking question?
At what point was the cocoa caramel labeled? I missed it because the diagram on the recipe is different.
The diagram for which one? The diagram no different. I haven't used a caramel yet. It's no diagram different. Is you miss it. Tomorrow I'm going to use the caramel, so no worries. The caramel is going to place on top and the bottom to stick it also. In the very beginning, I put a little bit of caramel inside, but after that I take it out. Now for the balancing of a cake, I don't put any caramel inside the diagram. Inside the cake. I put it on top and the bottom to stick it.
Is there any reason why you like to use butter bomb with whipped cream on mousse? If there's a lot of recipes, use only whipped cream.
No, like I explained to you, if you have a butter bomb inside the mousse, right, it's going to be more creamy, okay? But not suitable for all the recipe. The last session of other cake I make, right, I use a lot of meringue. This session I use more butter bomb because you see the difference, okay? It's just the cake that I choose. This time just nice is using the butter bomb. But if you see the pandan layer cake, I don't have butter bomb. It's a chantilly, it's a mousse, it's something close to mousse also. So just understanding. Easy to understand, more butter bomb, more egg yolk inside your recipe is going to be more creamy.
Some still confused with coconut milk and coconut cream.
Confused with coconut milk, coconut cream and coconut puree.
Yeah.
Okay, coconut puree is coconut. You know you have a coconut, right? You have juice, you have the meat. You blend it together, you get the puree. Okay, but I don't do myself. I buy. Okay, because it's not going to consistent. It's not consistent if you do yourself. Coconut milk is the meat. Okay, I don't say zest up, but they blend and after that they squeeze out the mixture. That is coconut milk. Coconut cream is that coconut milk. They leave it for some time. The fat float on top. That is coconut cream. Okay, that is the difference. If you want to be more clear, you search online. Easy. I also learn from online. You search what is coconut milk, what is coconut puree, what is coconut cream. They explain you super details and also they show you. If you find YouTube, right, they show you how to make it even more. Okay, easier. Okay, so all the question is done. Thank you very much today. We already over the time. So tomorrow I will go slightly faster. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye bye.